Hey guys, Evan here with Cypress Design Works, and today we're going to be talking about our Laguna 18BX Bandsaw. Got this about 6 months ago, so I've had enough experience with it to give you guys both my pros and cons and go over really what I think makes this an awesome bandsaw. It's a huge improvement over our old bandsaw, and I'm going to talk you through some of the key features that this bandsaw has that I think are worth every penny. So stick around, and hopefully you guys learned something. I like to start off all my videos with any sort of disclosures, and this is a good example of when that is applicable. We actually reached out to Laguna and offered to do a review of the bandsaw if they gave us a discount code. So that's what we did. We got a discount on the saw, and in exchange for that, you guys get a review video going over some of the features of the saw and what my honest, genuine thoughts are. Laguna doesn't have any editorial permissions over this video, so what you're hearing is actually my thoughts, not something that they've asked me to say, and certainly not excluding anything that they would want me to put in the video purely for that sake. But it's still important that you guys understand the relationship that we have with Laguna, because I would want to know if I was in your shoes, and also I believe it's the law. So there you go. Let's jump into the review. Some of the basics about the Laguna 18BX that I think are important to get kind of an understanding of the scale of the saw are its size and its power. So this is a 3 horsepower unit, so it's relatively powerful for a shop like ours, and it is an 18-inch saw, which means that it's got 18 inches between this column here and the blade, so you can cut an 18-inch wide board. It's also got a 16-inch resaw capacity, so from the base to the highest position you can set your blade guides is 16 inches, which is a ton of resaw capacity, and that's really why you need that big 3 horsepower motor, because cutting through 16 inches of vertical grain is a ton of strain on a motor. So this thing is a workhorse. I haven't quite put it to the 16-inch test yet, but I've done 13-inch resaws, and it handles it with no problem, especially with the carbide tip blade that I have on here. So yeah, it's a nice big saw. It has very, very heavy-duty wheels, which give it a lot of momentum. That paired with the large motor gives it a lot of power and a lot of momentum so that I can cut really heavy duty hardwood stock, which is really what we ask of this saw. Other than its scale and its power, there were 3 things that really made this saw stand out to me, and I'm going to go over all 3 of those features with you and what my thoughts are after owning the saw for a couple months. So those 3 features in order are the blade tension release, which is this lever back here that lets us tension and detension the blade. Number 2 are the ceramic blade guides, which I'll go over in a little bit more detail here in a minute. And number 3 is the foot brake, which I'll show you here on the side of the video. Foot brake allows you to both shut off and bring the blade to a stop. So you can turn power off to the machine and you can quickly bring the blade to a stop. Like I said, it has really big cast iron wheels that are nicely balanced, and that means that if you turn the power off without using the foot brake, it's going to keep spinning for a minute or 2 or 3 sometimes, because it's got so much momentum. The foot brake allows me to bring that blade to a stop safely, where I don't have to keep remembering to pay attention to that blade. It's not uncommon to have somebody turn the saw off, walk away, and come back and not realize the blade is still moving, and that's a huge safety risk that the foot brake completely eliminates. So those 3 features were key to me when I was picking out my saw, looking at the different brands and the different sizes, the different features. Those 3 things were critical to me, and honestly, since I've had this saw, I couldn't ever go back. So, number 1, the blade release. What this allows you to do is take the tension off of the blade when you're not using it. It may sound kind of silly if you're somebody who's got, just a smaller 12 or 14-inch bandsaw. Why do you need that? But what it allows your blade to do is it relaxes the tension on the blade, and it actually will help your blade last a lot longer. I've only had this saw for 6 months, but this is a feature that I expect to make my blades last longer, and when you're buying expensive carbide blades like this Laguna Resaw King, it's important that you take advantage of that feature. It's not something that I think is critical for all saws, certainly not if you're using smaller blades and you're using non-carbide blades that you're replacing every couple of months. But when you're spending $100+ on a blade, you want it to last a couple years, especially if you're taking it off and sharpening it and switching out blades a lot. And this makes it really easy to detension and retension back to where you had it set before without having to deal with setting the wheel and calibrating it every time. So that's a huge feature for me. Number 2, the ceramic blade guides. The ceramic blade guides were something that I honestly wasn't sure if I wanted or didn't want. I hadn't had any experience with them. The only ones I had before on all my other bandsaws were ball bearing guides. So my first question was, A, is this going to be easier or harder, and is it going to last longer or shorter, and is it going to cut better or worse, right? The 3 things you probably really care about. My experience has been nothing but positive. First of all, the actual ability to raise and lower and not lose my kind of calibration of my blade guides is huge. So that may be more common on these nicer, bigger saws. But on my older, smaller saws, that was not something I could do. Every time I raised or lowered the blade guides to make the cut in a safer fashion, I had to recalibrate, so I never did it. This saw is able to hold that centering really well, which I appreciate. But about the guards specifically, they're really easy to set up. all toolless adjustment, and I haven't had to adjust them in the 6 months that I've had the saw. Like, I genuinely have not had to mess with them. I only use one blade on my bandsaw, and that's a ripping and resawing blade here. This is a 3/4 inch, I think it's a 3 TPI Laguna Resaw King. So it's a carbide tipped blade, really not for doing anything like curve cutting. It's purely for doing resawing and joinery cuts. So that's what I use my bandsaw for. I have a smaller bandsaw that I use for curve cutting. So that's got like an 1/8 inch 10 TPI, I don't know, something else. So because of that, I've literally set this and I haven't had to mess with it. The lower blade guides don't move, so those have not shifted at all. And like I said, this is able to raise and lower without impacting the position of those guides really well. If you tighten it back down, it's going to be right back where you had it at the different height, and that allows me to use it and not have to mess with it on a regular basis, which is really handy. And of course, the third feature I already really went into detail on, which is the foot brake. Brings the saw to a stop and safely stops the blade so that I don't have to cut the tip of my finger off again like I did on my old bandsaw. So overall, I am really happy with the Laguna 18BX bandsaw. I haven't had anything go wrong with it. I'm sure as I get more and more experience with it, I'll be able to nitpick it a little bit more, but starting out, the fit, function, and format of this saw is really, really good. It does what it's supposed to do. It does it well. It's got the weight and the power and the size to do a good job on the larger pieces of furniture that we're building. Cuts nice, clean cuts. And once I set it up, it stayed where I asked it to. So I don't have any complaints. I definitely recommend this saw at the price point compared to other brands. It seemed like a really, really good buy. This saw is capable of doing just about anything. So far, so good. All positives for this bandsaw, and I definitely would recommend you guys check out the Laguna 18BX bandsaw. Or the 14BX. That's another great saw that's a little bit smaller than this one, but has a very, very similar setup to this. So it's basically just a scaled down version of this saw. Thanks, guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and leave a comment down below if you have any questions about this saw or about how we do our reviews. And obviously, if you hit that notification bell if you're subscribed, that would help you guys get notified when we make content like this in the future. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day.